So we'll open up to your questions now. I'll start with what we had in the chat.
Could you go back to the last screen for a second?
Sure,
That's the one. Could you leave it just for a minute?
of course. So Dawn, you're asking, you're stuck on the label economy, but you're unclear on how this represents an alternative to the money-based economy. How is it an economy? How does it enable material goods to be created and distributed? So imagine that you needed to create something, but it didn't have an impact. So in a satisfaction economy, it wouldn't have any value. But if it does have a positive impact on an individual, a group or the environment, then that impact is what would be valued and be used for trade as well.
So it sounds like you're not proposing an alternative to the money economy. You're just saying there need to be certain values that shape the economy. Is that
Yes,
fair?
ideally, that is what I'm saying. But looking at how the system is set up to maintain status quo, uh, the inability to change the system completely is why we need to uh, offer these alternative approaches, where rather than switching the system completely, we can build a new system which is a complementary alternative. The premise being that being in a single economic system, we are slave to the system uh, because we don't have choice. So it's not a metaphor, it's literal. Without choice, we are slaves to this single money-based system. And the way to be free of that slavery is to create an alternative economy. Give ourselves a choice.
Yeah, so B Corps are an example. Here in the US, we have cooperatives, credit unions, which all of which I, support and participate in. So, so yeah, okay. I just that clarifies the, what you're looking for. So,
Derry, should I move ahead with the screen?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
I'd love to hear any other questions. Oh yeah, Abby, you had your hand up.
Yeah. Hi. Whoops.
Sorry for cutting you short earlier, Abby.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Hi everyone. Well, I just wanted to say that thank you for your presentation. I enjoyed some of your language in particular. I liked the yin to this yang and the keys to their own craft, charting their own course by the stars of their passions. Really, really nice. Thank you. So I was part of the Liberated Learners Network in the 2020 teens and had a self-directed learning center that I co-founded and directed in Canada. And now my work has moved toward restorative justice and restorative practices in education, um, which I see as a way to provide some scaffolding to bring people to this point so that we can together arrive at, have the tools to even know how to talk to each other, first of all, and um, kind of arrive together at hearing a diverse variety of perspectives from people. And so I guess my main question is I love all that you said. I agree with these are all great things. And yeah, I think that, there needs to be multiple approaches to taking down this beast called, factory learning, and having entirely separate economies, working within systems. Those are all approaches that, we can each be working on. I guess what I'm curious to know is, I mean, I've enjoyed the inner development goals sessions of this conference, because I'm really coming at the approach that we can't really transform systems without transforming the hierarchical parts within ourselves that have created these systems in the first place. So I guess I'm curious to know how this model addresses that need to transform ourselves, and the kind of inner scaffolding we need to arrive at this kind of, very interesting learning. Thanks. I'd
Wow,
love to hear
that
your thoughts.
that was intense and amazing. Thank you for that. So, you know, let me start off by saying that uh, one of the most important ways uh, to scaffold onto this uh, new way of thinking is to visualize what's possible. So we have started with common ground of the polycrisis, but we also need common objective. And that's something that would increase our ability to trust each other, work with each other positively. Um, Sorry, I was trying to make the connect to your connection, but what could you just succinctly put your question across again? So,
Yeah, I'm just wondering how um, this model helps people, um, if there's any kind of scaffolding for people to get from point A to
got
point
it.
B.
Perfect. So, inner development goals. In fact, Richard had also pointed out um, you know, he had compared it with what brought me to satisfaction economy. I was working on a concept called cognitive balance, which is basically the harmonization of your thoughts, emotions, and behavior. So, within a societal context. So, in managing my dissonance to achieve that harmony, I realized that the dissonance would not end unless there's a solution proposed to end that dissonance or to end the unhealthy dissonance. There's, of course, healthy and unhealthy dissonance. The unhealthy dissonance that's being created by our systems is what needs to be inverted. And with that objective in mind, with that purpose in mind, is uh, how or what made me come up with this concept of this alternative complementary economy and these principles that basically are, like I said, uh, they 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 negate out the negatives of our current system. So there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to converse about. This is a very new idea. A lot of people have been talking about working on the effects of the socioeconomic system, and that work is very needed. But nobody is addressing the cause, which surprises me. The cause of all the ill effects, the cause of the poly crisis, is our socioeconomic system. And why are we just still only, going for that symptomatic approach and not a causal approach towards our solutions? How do you see the degrowth paradigm fitting, aligning with the satisfaction economy? Richard, do you want to just elaborate a little bit on the degrowth paradigm?
Degrowth paradigm, and I'm not really quite up to date on it, but it's with the idea that if we look at political campaigns, for example, it's all about grow the economy, and growing the economy uh, in many ways means growing our consumerism, which means just taking us down the path to our own extinction that much faster. And so the cultivation of lifestyles where we're not continuing to try to grow everything. We just want to find our humanity and get back to where life can really be satisfying.
So, that's true. The degrowth economy is required, but it's only true in our unsustainable, unhealthy competitive world right now. If if we were working towards enterprise, which was led by impact driven choices, uh, we'd be, that would be a different kind of economic growth. The possibilities then become beyond our imagination at this point of what we'd be creating or what we'd be doing.
If I can add to that, what you said yesterday, cognitive balance, to me ties in really nicely with what you present on satisfaction economy. It's more or less how we can actually cultivate cognitive balance. And the satisfaction economy itself, as I mentioned in chat, to me very much relates to the attention or to the idea that the Learning Planet Festival is working to develop about local learning ecosystems. So we're well beyond the school. We're really looking at whole communities. Yakovech's idea of education cities, and the satisfaction economy. Basically, it's just another way of saying what the people promoting self-directed learning are saying, but it brings in a whole other community of thinkers to the idea of self-directed learning. So this is where we can start to do what you said earlier, collaborate, come together with all these forces. So the right-centric education network is really, and you're one of the founders of it. I think everybody here knows about it. But what it is it's trying to get people to come together around the idea of bringing education into alignment with the Convention of the Rights of the Child, or into alignment with the evolving evolution of human rights. And so it's founded in that, but with the inherent rights of nature being ultimately what we're after, the rights of the planet as well as the people in it, and all of the life forms and otherwise that we have, and so anybody, human rights, satisfaction economy, thinking of all these things about how to make our world better. That's the kind of network, not an organization, just a way of thinking together that we all ground ourselves in this one basic concept that we're here to establish the rights, human rights, and rights of nature, but realizing that it's with young people that we really need to do that. Trying to change adults is just such a frustrating, hard thing to do. They're so locked in that if we can get education properly, bringing out people's humanity, cultivating humanity, then we gradually grow into a population that's got the mentality that we need to survive the satisfaction economy, let's say.
Yeah, it's our concept of flourishing in this current economy is in contradiction to the ethics that we learn at home. And the first learning ground is the home. The first things that we learn are values from within the home. And if we can't apply those values to our enterprise, then there's something wrong with the way we're doing things, and it needs to be changed. And that's what satisfaction economy is about. That we're creating an environment where we can uh, use the values that we're proud of, that we don't have to shy away from, that we don't have to feel guilty about. That doesn't harm others.
If I can add to that, Cranber, it's we have the problem of adults, parents, basically mimicking the way these professionals called teachers relate to kids, that authoritarian type of approach, just full of adultism. And so the parents are being trained indirectly by teachers how to treat their kids. So if we treat the home as people's sanctuary, you don't go in there and start telling people how to run their lives, but that you provide through school the models of what it is to relate to people, young and old, as equals, then we stand to make some ground. And so that's why I focus on education for trying to get this turned around.
And that's a very important, you know, realization here as well, that why we need to shift that, we need to make that shift from teaching to facilitation, especially, and guidance. Uh, that's where that's going to really come in. It brings in that ability to, because teachers, as of now, a lot of the miscommunication, the miscollaboration not happening, or the collaboration not happening with the parents, is because teachers, the whole concept of a teacher is, even in the Indian concept, is that of a guru, an expert, a person who knows everything, who never knows wrong. But teachers need to be fallible. We need to recognize them as human beings. We need to recognize that they are fulfilling a required role in a system, and they can fulfill that role beautifully. But is that role of a teacher still required, or do we need to shift to that facilitator role now? And what's the urgency to that shift?
If I could just add to that, and then I'll be quiet. I keep coming back to this Derry's book, and Another Way is Possible, Becoming a Democratic Teacher in a State School. And from his book, you can get a vision of what it's like to behave as equals with the students, with the young people. And one thing that he brought up in his book, and Derry, you can correct me here if I'm wrong on any of this, but one thing that he brought up is that one or some of the students suggested that he didn't do anything because the class was more or less self-directed. He was getting a free ride, earning his money and not having to work for it. But he was providing an example of how to be with young people. And so all of those children in his class are unlikely to fall into the pattern of having had an authoritarian teacher and then be authoritarian with your own children. They're
But
much more likely to have the democratic mindset of how to live with young people on equal terms.
yes,
So I'm going to be quiet now. I'm imposing myself too much.
not at all, Richard.
Can I follow Richard's comment, Karen?
Of course, Tim.
I wrote the book about my experience. I mean, I think I spent my whole life as a teacher trying to take the ideas of self-direction in a rights respecting and democratic context from all the reading I did as a student about Summerhill School. That's where it all started for me. And it led to some very funny experiences in the school because my class did develop all sorts of self-governing ways of dealing with problems, like how do you deal with 34 kids in a classroom all trying to do their own thing at the same time? How can you have a tolerable working environment when those are your conditions? And one day, the head teacher, it was very interesting. I thought I'd get fired, but I didn't. I kept getting promoted. And in my second year, I got put in charge of 7 classes working in this democratic, self directing way. but the head teacher used to bring visitors to my class. And one of the rules of being a teacher was you didn't leave your classroom at any point. You had to be there to supervise the kids all the time. It was quite funny. One day, the head teacher arrived at my class with some visitors from another school, and he couldn't see me anywhere because I actually wasn't in the room. I was in the school library helping some kids find some books. Um, and he was a bit embarrassed because he guessed that these other teachers would understand the rule that teachers shouldn't leave their classes unsupervised. So he said to the class, or one of the teachers said, "But it's very quiet in here. You all seem to be getting on with your work, and there's no teacher." And the class chair, Andrew, stood up and said, "Well, you see, our teacher, Mr. Hannam, is a bit soft. And if we didn't have our own class self-government, it would be chaos in here." The head teacher told me this afterwards when he was reprimanding me for leaving the class. And I said, "Well, what you said to me, Ernie, was the class should be supervised at all times." And of course, these kids supervise themselves. So they were being supervised. But to say to the visitors that Mr. Hannam's a bit of a softy, and if we didn't have our self-government, it would be chaos in here, has always struck me as very funny. And now I'm in contact with this character who ended up becoming the head teacher of an elementary school, which he ran in a very democratic way. Uh, this is 50 years after we were in the class together. He remembered this incident, and in fact, he's written a chapter in the book. I think that's what you're talking about, Richard, that example. I had endless examples of kids taking responsibility for things because they were given responsibility. That just seems obvious to me. If you want people to learn about democracy, they've got to do it in school. If you want them to learn to be responsible, they've got to be given loads of responsibility. It just seems obvious to me. It's lovely listening to your talk yesterday and today, Karen Beer. I don't know if you heard my talk the other day about 20% time, where I'm arguing that all schools should tomorrow um, give 20% of curriculum time to the interests, passions, and concerns, questions of the kids. The idea is catching on. There were so many parallel points between your two talks and my 20% talk. I've been scribbling comments all, that's why I wanted to see your slide again. Scribbling comments on the 5 pages of my talk where I can see parallels between what you're saying and what I'm advocating. When I think I saw in the chat that Richard said that he'd answered your questions on the basis of his experience at school. I didn't. I answered your questions on the basis of my current experience, where I'm quite nervous. The 20% time idea is catching on, and I'm getting invitation to talk to a group of 500 parents in London. It's beginning to catch on with teachers too, the idea of it being a no-brainer that we should listen to the kids and give time in the curriculum for their interests. I'm actually very nervous that at 85 next birthday, suddenly an idea is beginning to catch on and I'm going to have to run with it, create a Facebook page, be willing to go and give talks, etc., where I've hardly got the energy to get up in the morning anymore. So it's a slightly scary place I find myself in right now, to have an idea which does seem to be a no-brainer, suddenly appearing to be a no-brainer to other people. And some of those people are in a position to do something about it. Yeah, it's all a bit scary, but I love listening to your talks. Thank you very much indeed. The parallels between your points and your concepts and what I'm trying to do seem to be very strong.
Thank you so much, Derry. I love to take the conversation forward with you as well. And it's very reassuring that you say that. More people need to realize that this is not individual thought, it should be common knowledge. Uh, just as an example that we got from Upschool's Gavin McCormack, he was talking about how there's the English assignment of writing a letter to the principal for making a change in the cafeteria, for example. And the children will make the effort to write the content, the structure of the letter. They'll do their research for reasoning. They'll put in that effort, and then that letter is filed away in a cabinet. So they see that their effort has no value. And when you reverse that around, when you actually allow their effort to have an impact and for them to see it, just the change in their motivation to learn is can be remarkable. Yeah. Dawn, your hand was up first. We'll make Richard wait this time.
Actually, Wendy's hand was up first.
Sorry, go ahead, Wendy. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Richard. So much to say. This is really exciting. There is loads of information about the movement that started in the 80s about beyond GDP, the beyond GDP agenda that Nicolas Sarkozy encouraged people to look at. Can we measure how well a state is doing by something better than GDP? And what was fascinating and heartbreaking was that I can only speak from the research I've done in the UK, but in the UK, what came out during COVID was the decisions about when we took children back to school were based on how it was going to impact the economy growth in the future, not primarily on the well-being of the children.
Yes.
And it's I don't know if you're familiar with Bronfenbrenner's idea of an ecological framework, that as we are all individually influenced by these systems that we live within, and the outer system that Bronfenbrenner mentions is the ideas that govern what happened, what we all accept as social norms in our environment. And in the UK, there have recently been a lot of books coming out that are saying to people, we really need to wake up to the way that GDP, the economic decisions and policies that dominate what we do in our country, specifically with state education. And there are books that are coming out that you're kind of thinking, this is gaining traction. People are, but it's almost like we're kept so busy. We're kept on this hamster mill that's going round and round and round, and we don't have time to stop and think what we're doing. And we don't have the time, and it could be argued that we are developing less of the ability to stop and say, what is going on? What is the purpose of education? Why are we doing this? And if it is all for, we say to children in education, I read a book the other day that I didn't agree with all of it, but he asked the children what he thought education was about. And in it, he said, we lie to them. We say to them, work hard and you'll get a good job. And that's sadly not true. It's particularly the UK, but there's books where I'm noticing that, they're saying this GERM, the global educational reform movement, that is predominantly saying, if you do well, work hard, you will succeed and you'll be able to get on. I love what you're saying about if we could put that innovation into providing positive things that benefit all. Wouldn't it be lovely if we were able to do that? But we're not, until we can actually get off. Enough of us need to get off the treadmill to be able to say, what's going on, and to have a rational discussion about what we are doing and why we're doing it. Parents as well, the conversation about parents. There's research that I did some research that, so if I can find it, it's not hidden research. That where there was a political decision to change the way that we perceive good parenting to be, and good parenting became parents who prepare their children for the type of schooling that they are going to receive. Not, parents that allow their children to play were all of a sudden seen as being really irresponsible. So even outside of schooling, we're stopping that development of critical thinking and autonomy, because everything is focused on the styling of school that seems to provide a system that mirrors and maintains the inequality that we have. And there's so much in philosophy where people have said the greater the inequality you have, the more lack of autonomy people will feel, the more controlled people will be, and the less they will share with each other because the stakes are higher. So you're losing all of those things that you're saying matter in the satisfaction economy are being lost whenever we're experiencing greater inequality. And the inequality that we're having in the UK is just going through the roof. So it's a real matter of concern. I love all the things that you're proposing. It's how on earth you get them into the state education system, where, in my perspective, and you're just going to see more and more people coming out. It's an exciting time and there's exciting challenges. Thank you for what you're doing to raise these thoughts and questions.
Thank you so much, Wendy. So much to unpack in that in your comment.
Can I build on her
Of
last
course, yeah, go ahead, Don.
comment there? So there is a global movement of scholars to promote the idea that flourishing should be a central purpose of education. So there's the self-determination theory researchers and people from a lot of different academic disciplines are kind of contributing to this conversation in the academic journals and stuff like that. But building on that as well, I also posted I met, in the chat, put a thing about in loco parentis, and that's the legal principle that the whole idea of giving your kid to a teacher means that those kids that teacher takes on certain parental responsibilities, and it's more fundamental than anything they're actually otherwise accomplishing as an educator. It's the fundamental duty to care for that child. And so I propose in the essay, talk about in loco parentis as the legal principle. Is that, I think, is the a leverage point that we can use to better promote the adoption of the kinds of things where we like, because we could basically say, look, if you're doing psychological harm to the kids, that's a problem. And you're not meeting your in loco parentis responsibility, independent of what you're doing academically. You have this prior responsibility just by every adult that takes charge of a child has an in loco parentis responsibility. That's a fundamental legal responsibility of non-parents who are taking care of children. And so that's a way that we could use legal leverage. We could probably, have lawsuits or things to say, hey, this is fundamental. this is their well-being, this is how learning works around, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, or specifically the needs that would be this builds on. But say, you have a legal responsibility to do this. And so that's a way that we can begin to, you were talking about using teaching as an example for how parenting works, is if we can establish that autonomy is a fundamental human need, which there's plenty of evidence for, and that in loco parentis responsibilities mean that those schools are professionally responsible for providing support for that need, then that's a different approach than I think I've seen anywhere else, which is why I've been writing about it. Is I think that gives, in the American context, that gives class action lawsuit type of, fodder for, it's a basis for, actually putting it into the courts and saying, hey, this is fundamental. This is fundamental to being human. And let's actually say, hey, you don't get to do that stuff that actually thwarts their autonomy. You have to do it in some supportive way. And so then providing resources to then help the schools actually meet that responsibility. I think that's an interesting kind of new possibility that just been entertaining recently.
Thank you, Don. It's kind of like one of the next steps for satisfaction economy is a public interest litigation that we're working on filing here in India as well.
Oh,
And
neat.
so, of course, there's been resistance from legal experts on that so far because of their inability to understand it. So I need
Yeah.
to put it across in a better way, of course. And we're working.
I think, yeah, I think grounding it in the self-determination theory research, then you can be, really making a strong scientific case that these are fundamental things.
Yes.
That might be a way to help with that.
Just the fact of bringing in our most basic right of freedom, and the understanding that freedom comes with choice, and of course that without that choice we don't have that basic right of freedom either. So and why people don't realize that is coming to Wendy's point as well. It's not like getting off the treadmill. It's literally that we're in a covered cage. So we can't even see what's outside that covered cage. And that covered cage is, it's perpetuated by industry, which has shaped our education. And because industry has historically promoted narcissism through unhealthy competition, that's what's being promoted in our education as well. So the example of child well-being not being looked at during the COVID and instead economic growth being considered stems from that narcissistic attitude, which industry and education has created. Yeah. I think, Richard, you had mentioned about the happiness index. That brings out another point to consider, a view to consider, that if you see the global shifts happening and which countries are actually gaining in tech, which countries are gaining in well-being, these are the autocratic or the kingdoms. So when we consider extremes, one extreme would be extreme ownership in this money-based economy. So are we headed towards a system with extreme ownership, where currently the conglomerates are buying up all the food resources as well? So when you consider that, is this a shift to popularize a certain kind of living to keep the people manipulated and controlled? That you're popularizing tech hubs, which are also kingdoms. You're popularizing a well-being hub, which is also a kingdom. So are you the thought is coming up that are you trying to make the masses think that we're better off in a leader-follower paradigm? We just need a better leader. So we need to move away from that leader-follower paradigm as well. We need to be all co-creators. And that's another thing that a purpose of satisfaction economy is to move away from that, where everybody's a leader. Richard, your hand's still up.
Are you giving me the floor, Ramber, or you just want me to take my hand down?
You can sweep it with me, yes.
I want to bring attention to the link in chat that I put to Derry's talk on the 28th that was about creating bridges between the new and the old system. And so Derry had a really good talk there. One of the rare occasions where he actually unmuted himself before he started to talk. And so we have an example that can happen. And also presenting there were Mia from the Suvame from Quest, presented some really good information. Charlie Marino Romero, a lot of good information. And then John O'Reilly, who was there sitting in, contributed a nice bit about a needs project that he's working on. So that video is a nice resource, something that we can build off of. I mentioned the gross national happiness index in response to things that Wendy said, and just that whole problem. And I agree with your caution around that stuff, Paramber, that are these things just being used to manipulate people? And the school systems that we have themselves were presented to people.
It is about creating narratives and controlling the narratives.
Yes. And so the education system itself, the narrative around that isn't this going to be wonderful? Everybody will learn to read. It's going to be an equal society. But it was really a manipulation in the way that you said to control people. There was one other thing I put in there. Let me just see what it is. Yes, about the that paper that I've been writing. I've had a lot of the same experience as Derry inside public education. I got to run a program that gave students considerably more autonomy when they still had to study state mandated curriculum. And it just shows in what I have in part 2 of that, the importance, and I need to stress this, that the idea itself is not enough. The implementation of it, I would say, is more important, because I've seen school systems really wanting to do better, initiate programs where the people who have to implement them have no idea how to do it. And so they end up discrediting the ideas. They destroy the programs. They're gone within 3 or 5 years. And everybody, when you want to talk about it again, says, been there, done that, doesn't even want to consider it. And so that's extremely important that we look at implementation, not just the ideas themselves.
I think the biggest example of that would be socialism and communism. They've been demonized completely. So nobody's even willing to consider what they're all about. It's rather how they were managed, Great. So if there are no other questions, we'll end this event. Just
Karamber?
Yes, Richard.
I'm just wondering, I just saw Wendy's comment about audaciously doing research into well-being. Wondering if she's still able to join and make a comment on that.
I can. I've just started a PhD here in the UK, and looking at, I don't want to open a whole new Pandora's box, but there's a theory called salutogenesis, which was generated by a guy called Aaron Antonovsky, and he looked at what is the origin of health, came up with some really interesting ideas that if we use his model to look at what is happening in our education system and how we do education, it really challenges the idea that people that thrive in whatever environment they find themselves are people who find life to be comprehensible, manageable, and meaningful. It goes beyond economics, which is why I love everything that Karen Beer has just said, because it aligns brilliantly. And it looks at things being meaningful to the individual. And therefore, it does pose some issues within the UK, where everything is judged, as I said, by GDP, because it says, Antonovsky very much opens with the fact that this idea that if you're richer, life is better, or if things go well for you, and if you have what you need, things will go better. That falls down immediately when we realize that there are people in the world who have everything and yet are unable to cope with life. And sadly, we have a lot of celebrities that come to the news, as well as other not celebrities who take their lives despite having everything. And also there are people who have nothing and yet find complete contentment and peace. So salutogenesis is a really interesting way to look at how well-being is created and how that can be applied to education. That's what I'm hoping to do over the next few years in my PhD, and I have just started.
Very relevant, and we wish you all the best. And we know you're gonna, make us proud.
Yes.
Wendy, I just want to throw your attention to the comment I made, because there's already a causal model for mental well-being, with many decades of research behind it, and including recent research on meaningfulness being proposed as a need in the same way that autonomy, competence, and relatedness are. However, once they actually looked at it, it was found to be derived from the satisfaction of those needs. So it's I think you would do well to incorporate self-determination theory in your research. And
it's in there, Don. I am a paid up member of the Self-Determination Fan Club.
Yeah. So if you're the Center for Self-Determination Theory, that's the actual dues paying place.
I'm just sharing a few links as well of satisfaction.
I just put in chat also the Ottawa branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association has social justice, that everybody, no matter where they come from, feels is equal to anybody else, can walk into anywhere comfortable that they're going to be treated as an equal and respected. And then coupling that with self-determination. Those are its top two core values, the Canadian branch of the Ottawa branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association. So Wendy, if you want to use that just as a little plug in some paper that you write.
Thank you all so much.
My pen is literally burning here with notes that are going in.
Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for your dedication and passion. And I had this written down. It's stay inspired, stay connected, and keep growing.